You're walking home in the dead of night, boots clicking against the humid pavement, a saxophone crying from somewhere down Basin Street. The music curls through the fog like a ghost. It should be comforting, but tonight it drips with menace. The air smells of magnolia and iron. You pass shuttered storefronts, gas lamps flickering weakly against the dark, and for just a moment, you swear you hear something else beneath the jazz. A faint creak, a breath held too long, a soft scrape like wood splitting. Welcome to New Orleans, 1918, a city dancing between two wars, two worlds, unbeknownst to Moston, the edge of something unspeakable. You're listening to 102 Hours where stories don't just get told. They come alive in the dark. This isn't just a story about a killer. It's about a city that sang to stay alive. A place where every window hid a secret, and even the music wasn't safe. The tale you're about to hear has haunted New Orleans for over a century, not just because of the blood, but because no one ever really figured it out. You probably won't survive this. Not because you'll be next, but because by the end, you'll never hear jazz the same way again. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to 102 Hours, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments. Where are you listening from? And what time is it right now in your part of the world? Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let 102 Hours guide you into tonight's journey. May 23rd, 1918. You wake up to screaming. It's coming from the next room in a modest home on Upper Line Street, just above their corner grocery store. Joseph and Catherine Maggio are dying. The killer came while they were sleeping. No alarm, no struggle, just the soft, sickening sound of a chisel carving through the rear door panel. He didn't break the lock, he bypassed it entirely. He enters their bedroom and raises an axe. Their own axe. That's part of his ritual. He never brings his own. He uses yours. Joseph is struck first twice to the head. The skull fractures like dry plaster. He dies before he wakes. Catherine stirs. She opens her mouth to scream. She never finishes the breath. The killer slashes her throat with a straight razor so deep, her head nearly separates from her body. She doesn't die immediately. That's the worst part. When Joseph's brothers find them hours later, the room is soaked in blood, the sheets stiff. But Catherine is still alive. Barely. Her fingers twitch. Her lips try to form words. She dies before anyone can hear what she was trying to say. Nothing is stolen, nothing is touched. Just death, just deliberate, inhuman silence. The press runs wild. They call it madness. They say it's Italian mafia retribution, but the facts don't line up. There's no motive, no business debt. And what kind of hitman leaves the murder weapon neatly placed at the scene? This is no crime of passion. It's something colder, something ... curated. New Orleans police have seen their share of violence, but this one makes them sweat. The killer didn't just murder, he lingered. There's a basin of blood-washed water in the kitchen. He cleaned his hands before he left, almost politely, and outside. No one saw a thing, not yet anyway. Weeks pass. Then another couple, Louis Bazuma and Harriet Lowe. Same method, same savagery. Rear door chiseled open, victims in bed, their own axe. But this time, they survive briefly. Louis, conscious but concussed, tells police he remembers nothing. Harriet contradicts him, says she believes he was a German spy. The case twists with suspicion. But again, the injuries don't match a domestic fight. They match someone precise, practiced, someone who isn't finished. A third attack, then a fourth. Every few weeks, Italian grocers, working class couples. No pattern except that eerie signature, door chiseled, axe from the house. Valuables untouched. People start locking up tighter. Not that it helps. The Axeman doesn't care about locks. He makes his own openings, and now something else begins to surface, something subtle, whispered. All the murders happen on nights with no jazz playing nearby. You hear the theory in bars, in churches, on street corners. He only strikes in silence. A grim joke spreads. Keep your gramophone on, or you'll be next. Jazz, suddenly, isn't just music, it's protection. A city already obsessed with its sound now clings to it like a shield. Parents make their children fall asleep to records. Nightclubs stay open longer. Even the police admit they've never seen anything like it. One historian later wrote that New Orleans wasn't just haunted by the Axeman, it started to dance for its life. But it's not all folklore. There's something factual beneath the fear. You learn that New Orleans in 1918 was a city of tension, still rebuilding from floods. Torn between French Creole heritage and Americanization, and now gripped by a global flu pandemic. People were on edge already. The Axeman pushed them into the abyss, and one bizarre forensic detail sticks with you. Flower footprints at multiple crime scenes. Investigators find white footprints across the floor. Someone had stepped through flour left out overnight, maybe. For bread, the tracks lead from the bed to the door and vanish, not smudged, not erratic, just gone. Some detectives say it's sloppy work. Maybe the killer wore gloves and wiped his shoes. Others think it's something else. Investigators still question whether the Axeman was ever entirely alone. Some of the murders happened miles apart, too far to travel on foot between them. Could it have been a group, a pact, or more chilling copycats, feeding off fear? That whispering saxophone is back, fainter now, but as you lean toward the window, you realize something. There's no music coming from your street. You check the record player. The needle has stopped. The house is quiet, too quiet, and that's when you hear it. A faint knock at the back door. You freeze. The knock is light, barely more than a tap. Could be the wind. Could be a branch, could be someone playing around, but you know better. You don't move, you just listen, and the silence stretches, long, heavy, not even the crickets dare speak. That's when you remember the details more, almost laughable when you first heard it. He never kicks in doors, he carves them, so you imagine it now. The soft slide of metal against wood, a chisel pressed in deliberate rhythm. Tap, 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 just like he did to Joseph and Catherine Maggio. Police never solved that case, didn't even come close. But the killer left behind a calling card. The chiseled door panel removed with surgical care, left leaning against the wall like it belonged in a gallery. Some officers tried to say it was coincidence, just an easy entry method. But the cuts were too perfect, too practiced, a signature of sorts. Now the pattern has started to repeat. June 28, 1918, New Orleans wakes to a new headline. Grocer attacked. In sleep, Axeman strikes again. Anna Schneider, 8 months pregnant, is found covered in blood. Head and face battered beyond recognition, but alive. Her husband had left for work only hours earlier. The attacker broke in through a rear panel and used a blunt object. Not an axe this time, but a lamp. Even so, the injuries are devastating. She can't describe her assailant. No witnesses. Number. Robbery, just blood. Again, dot, and just like that, the city feels it. The randomness is growing. The Axeman, or whoever he is, isn't sticking to a type anymore. Married, single, male, female, elderly, it doesn't seem to matter. He only needs you to be home, asleep, vulnerable. You hear conversations shifting. No longer if, but when. A city known for its bravado suddenly lowers its voice. Clubs stay open late, yes, but patrons walk home faster. Neighbors double-bolt their doors. Children are warned to avoid alleys, even in daylight. And if a record skips, people shudder, glance at their back doors, because the Axeman is hunting, and no one knows why. Historians call this the rise of the urban phantom, a wave of early 20th century killers who thrived not just on crime, but confusion. Jack the Ripper, Cleveland's Mad Butcher, the Atlanta Ripper, all faceless, all erratic, all devouring media attention while leaving police chasing ghosts. New Orleans has its own phantom now. August 1918, the city simmers in swamp heat. That's when Pauline and Mary, Bruno mother and daughter, wake to the sounds of breaking wood. The back door of their home is splintering. Someone is inside. They scream. A neighbor, Orlando Giordano, rushes in and sees the intruder fleeing. Heavyset, fast, face partially obscured. This time, the man escapes. But something is different. This attack feels rushed, sloppy, almost panicked. Authorities later arrest Frank Giordano and his son Yes, the neighbor who tried to help. But neither fits the physical description. The public suspects foul play. Some say the police needed to arrest anyone to quell the rising panic. Investigators still question whether Frank and his son were scapegoats, sacrificed to buy time and comfort in a city unraveling. You can't help but wonder, did the Axeman panic that night? Was he surprised by their screams? Or did he want to be seen for just a moment? And then, silence. No attacks for weeks. The press goes quiet. Theories fade like smoke. Maybe it's over. Maybe the music worked. Then October comes, and with it, the most brutal attack yet. October 1918, Charles and Rosie Cortamiglia live in Gretna, across the river. Rosie hears the noise first, then the crash, then pain. When neighbors arrive, they find Rosie staggering into the street, holding her dead 2-year-old daughter in her arms. Blood soaking through her dress. Her husband lies inside, head crushed by an axe. Rosie survives, but barely. In a daze, she names their neighbor Orlando Giordano as the killer, the same man who tried to stop the Bruno attack. His son, 18, Frank, is arrested too. It makes no sense. Giordano is elderly. Frank is overweight and physically limited. Neither could have slipped in silently, delivered such focused blows, and escaped unseen. But the city wants answers. Frank is convicted, sentenced to hang. Only years later, Rosie recants her accusation, saying police pressured her while she was still disoriented with grief and injury. The convictions are overturned. Another dead end. Another injustice. Another name added to the long list of not the Axeman. You realize something. This isn't just a crime spree. It's a campaign of fear, and the Axeman is conducting it like a composer crescendo. Silence, chaos, silence again. The unpredictability is part of the performance. You try to sleep that night with jazz playing low on your phonograph. The record skips, just once. but long enough for you to remember the detail about flower footprints. Long enough for you to glance at your back door and wonder, would you hear a chisel before it's too late? Because here's the thing about the Axeman. He never knocks twice. You wake to music and dread. It's morning, but your bones don't believe it. Outside, the city yawns beneath a veil of sweat and smoke. New Orleans never really sleeps, just goes quiet in cycles. And lately, you've started to count those cycles the way people used to count thunder after lightning. How many days since the last axe? Because it's coming. You can feel it. What the press doesn't tell you but survivors remembers, that something always feels off before the Axeman comes. A stillness in the air, animals refusing to move, radios that won't hold their signal, and then he chisels through your sleep. The investigators try to draw lines, build timelines, sketch patterns, but nothing sticks. Why one house and not another? Why one couple spared and another butchered? You overhear a detective at a bar mumble into his whiskey, he's like a damn ghost who borrowed skin. Not even an exaggeration. The cops have no idea what to do with the crime scenes. Each is worse than the last, and yet they all feel arranged, as if someone is staging a play for an invisible audience. The tools always left behind, the doors entered from the rear, the victims never wealthy, always ordinary. Grocery store owners, working class families, a reminder, maybe, that this killer doesn't want status, he wants silence and terror. Let's talk about the flower you keep hearing about. Eat at first, it feels like urban legend, but it's not. It's baked into the police reports. At several crime scenes, flour bags were knocked over, spilled across the floor, and through it, bare footprints, human, male, but never full, never a trail. Just a few prints, and then nothing, as if he stepped through one room and evaporated. One officer swears the prints circled the bed just once. That's the part that haunts you. Why circle the bed? Was he watching them sleep? Theories start to bloom like rot. Jazz demon theory gains traction born from a drunken street preacher shouting downtown. He says the Axeman is a spirit that feeds on silence. The idea sounds ridiculous, until you realize people believe it not because it's likely, but because everything else has failed to make sense. One fringe pamphlet claims he's a fallen angel cast into Crescent City, punishing the faithless. Another says he's an escaped mental patient from Baton Rouge. But the most whispered theory, he's a butcher, a real one. The butcher theory is chilling because it fits. New Orleans, 1918, dozens of slaughterhouses operate in and around the city. Axes are common. Blood is normal. Some suggest the killer worked in meat, that he knows how to cut quietly, cleanly, efficiently, in one crime scene. A physician noted the angle of the wounds and said it looked almost anatomical. Not wild swings, controlled ones. This isn't a madman in a frenzy. This is someone who knows exactly how to kill, how to clean, and how to leave without leaving. Investigators still question whether the Axeman might have been part of the city's blue-collar underworld, a quiet man with calloused hands and a blank face, invisible by design. You pass butchers now and wonder, the man who handed you your pork chops last week, was he strong enough to swing an axe that clean? You think so. But here's what you really can't shake. It's not just the wounds or the footprints or the randomness. It's the music by now. People are obsessed with the idea that jazz keeps him away. It starts subtle. Gramophones left on overnight. jazz clubs refusing to close. Then whole neighborhoods agree to pipe music through open windows. You walk down Burgundy Street and hear brass leaking from every brick, a ghostly rhythm like the city's own heartbeat, playing defense. You pause at a stoop, look into the apartment window, and spot a woman sleeping peacefully. Behind her, a trumpet solo spills out of the radio. You exhale. If jazz is armor, then maybe tonight she'll be safe. But what happens when people forget? When the record skips? Because on March 10th, 1919, something does. Steve Boker, a grocer, wakes in the middle of the night, dizzy, disoriented, barely able to stand. Blood runs into his eyes. He stumbles into the street, collapses. Neighbors rush out. His skull is fractured. Rear door chiseled open. Axe left behind. He survives, but he remembers nothing. The police ask what he heard, what he saw. Nothing, but you want to ask. Was music playing? Nobody knows. Nobody asks. Later, that same week, another attack. Sarah Lauman, alone in her apartment, is found unconscious with a head wound so deep, part of her skull is missing. Yet somehow, she lives. This time, the door isn't just chiseled, it's practically carved open like a window frame. The killer didn't rush. He took his time. Again, he left no fingerprints. Again, he used her own axe. And again, no one hears a thing. People start taping notes to their doors. We play jazz all night. Don't kill us. The newspapers call it hysteria. But you know better. This isn't panic. This is performance. The city has become a stage. And the Axeman, he's listening at night. You lie in bed with a trumpet solo spinning on loop, wondering if he's already at your back door, wondering if Flower would catch his step, wondering if you'd hear him before you felt him. Because what scares you most isn't that the Axeman kills, it's that he walks in silence and leaves you alive, just long enough to hear the music fade. You don't sleep much anymore, not deeply, not without music bleeding from a corner of the room. The jazz isn't soothing. Not really. It's more like a signal. Flare your last line of defense against something you'll never see coming. You picture him out there, coat dark, eyes empty, chisel in one hand and silence in the other, always waiting for a window to go quiet. Then one day, everything changes. March 13th, 1919. The New Orleans Times-Picayune receives a letter, typed, sloppy, like it was punched out on a machine older than the city itself. The paper smells faintly of smoke. The letter is addressed to no one and everyone at once. It claims to be from the Axeman, and it's not a confession, it's a performance. The writer says he's not human, that he is a demon, a spirit of hell roaming the earth, especially the city of New Orleans. He mocks the police, calls them incompetent. Then, he makes a promise. At exactly 12:15 a.m., on the night of March 19th, he will strike again. But he gives a condition. Anyone playing jazz at that exact moment will be spared. Play music, and you live. Stay silent, and you die. You reread it twice, and each time it feels less like a threat, and more like an invitation to fear, to theater, to chaos. The city is horrified. But something strange happens. Something the Axeman may not have expected. New Orleans doesn't retreat. It dances by the afternoon of March 19th. Every record store in the French Quarter is sold out of jazz. Bars bring in extra bands. Gramophones are dragged out onto porches. People who never cared for music before become overnight fans. Children learn to tap out rhythms on pots and pans. Street corners echo with trumpets and laughter too loud to be real. This isn't celebration, it's survival. You walk down Canal Street and the noise is everywhere. Clashing rhythms, voices singing off-key, a blur of defiance wrapped in brass and fear. At one point, someone even composes a song called Don't Scare Me, Papa, inspired by the Axeman's letter. It plays on repeat in one corner bar until the owner's hands tremble too much to flip the record. That night, you stay up. Like everyone else, at 12:14 a.m., you're counting seconds. At 12:15, you're holding your breath. The trumpet solo is winding down. You jump from your seat and replay it, just in case. On the street outside, shadows lean into window light and then vanish. You think you hear something scrape against wood. Then nothing, no screams, no sirens, no blood. By morning, the city is whole, shaken but whole. The Axeman didn't strike. People call it a miracle. They say music saved the city. Some suggest it was a hoax all along. But you know better. You've seen the way fear makes people obedient. This wasn't a hoax. It was a test. A New Orleans past, just barely. The newspapers run with it. They call it the night the city danced. Some compare it to the Pied Piper myth. Others say the Axeman never existed at all, just a figment, just hysteria. But you know that's not true, because a week later, the silence comes back. It's late March when grocer Orlando Giordano is attacked. Again the rear door is opened with a chisel. Again the weapon is an axe from inside the house. Again the victims are left bleeding, barely alive. But now there's a difference. The wounds seem messier, more chaotic, less surgical. Someone saw something. A neighbor says the attacker moved differently this time. Not rushed, not sloppy, but almost unsure, as if he was reacting instead of leading. You start to wonder if all this noise, all this jazz, has shaken him too. Or maybe just. Maybe he's not alone. Maybe someone else has taken up the axe. A copycat, an admirer. The Axeman, you think, might have become more than a man. He might have become an idea. Still, the music doesn't stop. Not anymore. It's become a part of the city's bloodstream, like humidity and heartbreak. You notice older women humming as they hang laundry. Teenagers playing makeshift drums with broomsticks. Even churches add jazz elements into their evening services. It doesn't matter if it fits. What matters is the rhythm never dies. The rhythm is armor. Investigators still question whether the letter actually came from the real killer. Some believe it was the work of a deranged journalist trying to stir headlines. Others suspect someone within the police force itself, desperate to push the public into constant vigilance. But none of those theories hold for long, because fear doesn't need facts. It just needs repetition. And right now, the Axeman's story is echoing in every house, every note, every dream. You sit by your window tonight and listen to a cornet player on the balcony across the street. He's good, too good for this hour. You smile, almost. Then the record skips. Just once, your stomach clenches. You hold still. You think of the flour on the floor, the axe in your shed, the faint scent of metal drifting through your screen door, and in that breathless pause before the music resumes, you swear you hear it. A single footstep behind your house. You don't even turn around. You just reach for the needle and push it gently back onto the spinning vinyl. The jazz kicks in again, brighter, faster, almost cheerful. You let the sound wrap around you like armor, because whatever it was behind your house, it's gone now. Or maybe it never left. Maybe it's still listening, waiting, measuring you by your music. But across the city, someone doesn't press play fast enough. March 28, 1919. The screams start on Rampart Street. Frank and Sarah D'Antonio run a small grocery, like so many others before them. Their family has been in New Orleans for generations. Frank is known for his bread, Sarah for her soft voice and quick smile. They're respected, ordinary, which means they're perfect neighbors. Find Frank sprawled in the hallway just past the kitchen, skull shattered. Sarah lies across the bed, still breathing, barely. A child's toy is half crushed beneath her elbow. On the floor, the axe, the rear door. Chiseled, no signs of forced entry beyond that. No money missing, nothing stolen, just another echo in the Axeman's symphony. But this one is different. A few details don't quite match the others. There's no spilled flour. The wounds are messier. The angle of the strike suggests hesitation, or maybe fatigue. And this time, there's a fingerprint. Just one, partial, smudged. But it's there. The police celebrate for a day, until the print matches no one. It's not in their records, not from any known criminal. Just another invisible mark from a man who slips between facts like smoke. People stop cheering after that dot. Instead, they turn back to their phonographs and turn the volume up just a little louder. By now, the city is playing jazz around the clock. What started as a defense has become obsession. Music leaks through every wall, filling every silence, like sand against a rising tide. Even hospitals let live bands perform in the lobby. Not for morale, for protection. You walk down Elysian Fields and count how many houses are quiet. 1, 2, 3, each. One sends a chill through your spine. Because silence isn't just absence now. It's invitation. That's when it hits you. The Axeman doesn't need to be seen anymore. He doesn't even need to break in. He's already in everyone's head. A walking crescendo of fear. And somewhere in that chaos, a letter arrives. Another one. This time, it's handwritten. Neater, different voice. It doesn't claim to be the Axeman, but it describes him. He walks like a butcher and listens like a priest. It says, he hates arrogance. He loves rhythm. He only kills those who forget their place. That last line burns. Forget their place. The letter ends with a single sentence. He will come again, but never to the same rhythm twice. You don't know who sent it. No one does. But somehow, it feels right. It feels true. And then comes April. Another break-in. Another grocer. This time, in Mid-City, Anthony Pepe, 42, found with his head caved in. The weapon, once again, from his own kitchen. His wife survives, but loses her eye. The front door was untouched, but the back panel is carved. Precisely, same as always. But here's what really catches attention. A note dot left behind. Scribbled in the margins of a newspaper on the kitchen table. 4 words. Still don't believe me. No signature, no explanation, but the room goes cold anyway. The newspaper was from 2 days before the attack, meaning someone had been in the house, watching, waiting. You imagine him standing over the table, pen in hand, while the couple slept a few feet away. As if this wasn't murder anymore, it was messaging. Investigators still question whether the Axeman was taunting the public or communicating with someone specific. A rival, a partner, a copycat. Some even suggest he was sending warnings to those he hadn't yet chosen. Theories multiply like flies, but one, just one, begins to take root. That the Axeman wasn't killing at random, he was selecting his victims. The way a conductor selects notes, carefully, deliberately, building towards something. An ending no one can yet see. And if that's true, then the city is just a stage, and everyone inside it, an instrument. You look down at your own hands and wonder, are you a note, or are you next? The sun sets early that day. Clouds roll in thick and slow, casting long shadows against the walls of your apartment. The jazz plays on, but your ears are tuned to something else now. A rustle, a creak, a breath behind the plaster. You swear you hear footsteps in the attic, but when you check, there's nothing, only a single, dusty axe tucked behind a water heater. You don't remember putting it there. You leave the attic door open that night, not out of bravery, but because closing it feels worse. Like you're pretending you didn't just find an axe you don't recall owning, wedged in a corner with dust that doesn't quite match the rest. You lie in bed with your eyes fixed on the ceiling and your ears tuned not to the music playing softly in the background, but to the quiet behind it, because now the silence feels personal, and you're not the only one across New Orleans. People start seeing things. Figures near the levee at dawn, footsteps in courtyards that vanish into brick, a shadow in the corner of the barbershop, standing too still for too long. These sightings never come with names, just feelings, and no one really wants to say them out loud, because speaking his name might invite him in, but fear still finds its way through the cracks. The police, desperate and exhausted, decide to shift their focus. They begin cross-referencing all the victims' grocers, mostly Italian immigrants, small business owners. It's enough to draw whispers of organized crime, vendettas, revenge killings. The mafia theory returns, stronger this time. Some say the Axeman is a hired killer, cleaning up debts. Others argue he's a vigilante, punishing a corrupt network from within. But again, the details don't fit. None of the victims had known ties to the underworld. And besides, what kind of mob? Hit involves leaving the weapon behind like a signature on a canvas. Still, it gives the newspapers something to chase. They print maps, mark locations with little axe icons, draw lines connecting dots that never touch, and the public hungry for clarity starts drawing their own conclusions. One headline reads, "The killer among us." Another says, "Is the Axeman political?" And yet, despite all the noise, the real music plays elsewhere, because the city has started humming a strange new song. Every jazz bar is packed. Not with tourists, this isn't that kind of time, but with locals. People who used to hate jazz now sway to it nightly. There's a grim loyalty in the air, like each brass note is a prayer and every drum beat is a shield. You stop into a dive bar in Trim one evening and watch as the trumpet player pauses between sets. The room stills. Nobody breathes. Then someone gently taps a spoon on a glass to fill the space until the next song begins. It's automatic now, instinctive. The sound must never die. You leave that night with your heartbeat matching the tempo. Back at home, you think about the victims who survived, about their half-memories and garbled testimonies. Some of them claimed they felt the Axeman more than they saw him, that he moved like a fog, all shadow and heat, and then pain. One woman swore he smelled like burnt sugar. Another said his footsteps didn't make sound but still shook the floor. And one young boy, who lived but lost both his parents in an attack, told a reporter the man's face was covered in ashdot. The stories are too strange to be helpful, but they aren't dismissed because the details keep returning. Always the back door, always the chisel, always the axe from inside, and always when the music is gone, then the pattern breaks again. A new murder, different in its brutality. A man named Leon Vetro is found not in bed, but outside, in the alley behind his house. His body is crumpled in a strange pose, as if he'd been dropped from the air. The blow came from behind. Quick, efficient, still the axe. But this time, there's no break dash in, no door carved. Police find no signs of forced entry at all. And that's what frightens you most. Because if the Axeman didn't come through the door, where did he come from? You start double-checking your windows, inspecting your vents, listening to your walls. The logical part of you fights back. This is madness. He's just a man. But the rest of you, most of you, knows better, because now the Axeman is moving. With new freedom, as if the city's defenses, even the jazz, are starting to fail. Investigators still question whether this attack was even connected. They suggest a copycat again, or maybe a dispute gone wrong. But the axe says otherwise, and so does the fear. The people know. You walk down Royal Street and notice fresh candles on every stoop. Homemade altars made of broken instruments and old newspaper clippings. Someone has scrawled "play" or "pray" in chalk on the sidewalk. You don't know if it's a warning or a mantra. At work, nobody speaks of the murders anymore. But every cafe, every shop, even the post office, plays soft jazz in the background. Not because they believe it will save them, but because they can't afford to find out. You start hearing stories from outside the city now. Baton Rouge, Lafayette, smaller towns claiming their own strange break-ins. Axes gone missing, returned cleaner than before. Bread left uncut on counters. Shadows seen in empty bedrooms. But there are no bodies. Not yet. It's like the Axeman is practicing, widening the stage. You sit up late that night with your record player spinning, your eyes trained on the cracks in the floorboards. You don't expect anything to happen. But around 3 a.m., the music slows slightly, not stops, just shifts. Almost imperceptible. But there it is. The trumpet hits a note, a hair too flat. The saxophone stutters, like someone breathed on the needle. And for a moment, you swear the melody changes. Not by accident, like someone else is choosing the rhythm now. You don't tell anyone about the music that night, because how do you explain something like that? A jazz record that didn't skip or stall, just shifted, as if someone, somewhere, reached through the speakers and nudged the tempo ever so slightly. Not enough to notice if you weren't already listening for it, but you were. And now you can't unhear it. And you're not alone. The next morning, a radio DJ named Louis Fontaine abruptly ends his morning broadcast. Mid-song, he doesn't explain. He just walks out of the studio, leaves the mic live for nearly 5 minutes, then comes back on and says he's changing his rhythm. Then silence, then static. People call it a breakdown. But you keep thinking about that phrase. He's changing his rhythm. It spreads like a riddle through the French Quarter. Bartenders whisper it to each other between drinks. Streetcar drivers murmur it at red lights. At some point, it becomes a kind of code. Like everyone's acknowledging the same thing without having to explain it. And then come the survivors, not new ones. The ones from before, still healing, still haunted, but now they're speaking up. You listen to them, closely. Survivors like Sarah Lauman. She'd been left for dead, her head split open so deeply that even doctors didn't expect her to recover, but she did. And now, months later, she agrees to be interviewed. You lean forward as she speaks. I saw him, she says, eyes distant. Not clearly, but enough. She describes a tall man, no hat, no gloves, a pale scar running down his left cheek. His clothes were clean, pressed, and he didn't run. He walked slowly, like he belonged there. She doesn't remember what he said, but she's certain he spoke. Just one word, she whispers, and then I went out. They ask her what the word was. She hesitates. Listen. That's all he said. And then he swung the axe. You feel a chill run along your spine, not because of what he said, but because it wasn't a threat. It was an instruction. Listen, that word, like everything else about him, is deliberate. A performance cue, a conductor's signal. Another survivor, Louis Bazuma, tells his story again. This time, with more detail. He remembers waking to pain and darkness, yes, but also to music. Not from his own house, from the street outside, a trumpet echoing off the alley walls. And when he looked up, the man with the axe wasn't hurrying away, he was still there, standing in the doorway, listening. You realize something in that moment. This isn't just a killer who leaves clues behind. He lingers. He wants to be remembered, and he is. But some memories aren't meant to survive. Pauline Bruno, one of the women attacked months earlier, is committed to a sanitarium outside of Baton Rouge. She begins painting obsessively. Not people, not places, just one image, over and over again. A man in black, standing in a doorway, with a white face and no eyes. The doctors say it's stress-induced, that it's not literal, but each painting includes one more detail than the last. The position of the body changes, the angle of the light. One includes what looks like a record player in the corner. Another has musical notes drawn around the border, like a twisted frame. Someone sneaks one of her paintings out and brings it back to the city. It sells within the hour. People hang it in their bars and say it's protection, a ward, a reminder to keep the music on. But it doesn't work, because just as the image spreads, so does the silence. Another attack. July 1919. An elderly couple, the Alberities, are found in their kitchen, surrounded by shattered glass and broken porcelain. The wife is dead. The husband clings to life for 2 more days before succumbing. No valuables taken, no signs of struggle. Just the axe, the chisel, and something new. This time, the killer didn't go in through the back. He came through the ceiling, a hole cut clean. Through the roof boards, no ladder found, no damage to the floor below. Just a neat, gaping space above their bed, as if he dropped straight in from the sky. Investigators still question whether this was even possible. Some say it was staged. Others insist the hole was there before. But the damage didn't match decay or accident. It matched design, and now the fear changes shape. Because if the Axeman can come from above, from within, from anywhere, then where are you safe? You walk down Conti Street and count the chimneys, all sealed now. Most with iron grates welded shut. Some with makeshift covers, wooden boards, tarps, even mattresses pinned across them. Everyone's improvising, no one is sleeping, and you've stopped trusting your ceiling. You check it every night before bed. You tap the beams with a broom handle. You pull down the attic stairs and scan the shadows. Nothing ever moves. but you swear you smell something. Burnt sugar and something wet, like old rust. He's not there, but you know he was. And maybe still is. You sit beside your record player, fingers trembling slightly as the vinyl spins on. You think about Sarah Lohman's one word. Listen, and now you do. Because what if the silence isn't just absence? What if it's him? What if he is the silence? You begin to understand why New Orleans has always danced with ghosts. It's not superstition, it's survival. When the shadows linger and the music falters, the dead don't just rise, they remember. And if the Axeman is what people say he is, less man, more myth, then he's not going anywhere. He's just waiting for the next rest in the melody. It's August now, 1919. Heat settles on the city like a fever that never breaks. People wipe sweat from their brows with hands that never quite stop shaking. The newspapers have stopped printing full stories about the killings. They summarize now, just brief mentions, as if saying less will make the truth smaller. But fear doesn't shrink, it mutates. Mardi Gras looms, and nobody knows what to expect. New Orleans was built for spectacle. Every February, the masks come out. Parades wind through the streets like veins, costumes shimmer, horns wail. People laugh louder than usual, maybe because they know something is always lurking behind the music. But this year, the laughter is thinner. It stretches too far. The smiles last a second too long because nobody knows if the Axeman will dance with them or through them. The police double patrols. Jazz bands are hired to perform along the parade routes, not just for entertainment, but for insurance. Some floats are covered in gramophones, rows of spinning records, all playing at once, like a broken choir. One float carries a mock Axeman, tall hat, fake blade, white mask. People don't cheer, they look away. You feel it like everyone else. The dread isn't sharp anymore. It's soft, like velvet soaked in blood. You hear laughter and look over your shoulder. You see a man with a cane and wonder if it's a chisel hidden in the handle. You smell beignets and for a second think of burnt sugar again. The parade passes. Nobody dies, but something's off later that night in the quiet neighborhoods of Treme. Several families report the same thing. Music boxes going off at the same time. No one wound them, no one touched them. They played 5 notes, all the same, all in the same order, and then silence. That's when the nightmares return. People dream of footsteps on rooftops, of soft thuds above their heads, of jazz melodies, slowing down, melting into lullabies sung in a voice they can't place. You start keeping a candle lit in the hallway. It's not superstition, it's just comfort. Until one morning, it's gone. The candle, the holder, everything in its place. A single match, unused. Unused. You stare at it for minutes, maybe longer. The door was locked, the windows latched, but something was here, not a break-in, a reminder. You feel watched, not constantly, just enough. Just often enough that you change your routine. You walk different streets. You leave lights on in empty rooms. You tap your record player before going to sleep, just to check, just to be sure. Because lately, even jazz isn't enough. That's what you hear now. The murmurs. People saying it under their breath. The music's not working anymore. It doesn't matter if it's true. The fear believes it. Investigators still question whether the Mardi Gras silence was a sign that the Axeman had moved on, or merely reset. Some say he was never planning to strike that night. that it was always about momentum. Keep them guessing, keep them afraid. But then why the music boxes? Why the match? And why now do people start to vanish? No bodies, no blood, just absence. A milkman named Theo stops delivering, his bike found leaning against a tree, his sack full of bottles, untouched. A seamstress named Alina misses work. Her apartment is locked from the inside. The phonograph is spinning, but no record plays. And then, the most chilling, a child, Henry, 7 years old, disappears walking home from school. His parents return home to find a note drawn in crayon on the kitchen wall. 3 stick figures, one smaller than the others. A door drawn in black, and beneath it, 2 words: keep playing. No one sees the child again. This isn't just murder anymore. This is performance art in its most terrifying form. A piece written in blood, orchestrated in silence, and now moving into its next act. You sit in Jackson Square, watching a trumpet player work his magic under a tree. His case is open for tips, but no one walks by. No one listens, except you, and you hear it. A wrong note, just one. The rest is perfect. But that one note wasn't flat or sharp, it was off-wrong in a way you can't describe. Like a voice cracking at the end of a prayer. The man finishes the song and looks right at you. He doesn't smile. He just says, "That one was for him." Then he packs up and walks away. You never see him again. That night, your dreams are different. Not blood, not axes, not screams, just a hallway, a chisel, a door opening on its own. And jazz, slow and strange, playing from somewhere behind it. You wake up with the taste of metal in your mouth, and a record spinning. You don't remember starting. You don't tell anyone about the dream, about the hallway, about the jazz that played itself while your mouth filled with a metallic temps like pennies left out in the rain. You try to laugh it off, too much reading, too little sleep, but the laughter sticks in your throat like a splinter. You try to move on, try to breathe normally, but the city doesn't let you. It has a way of pressing its fingers gently but firmly into your ribs, reminding you that fear is as much a part of life here as brass bands and bar fights. New Orleans doesn't forget, and neither do you. People start looking harder at the evidence, at the consistency, at the strangeness of it all. And that's when a new theory surfaces. One that doesn't come from police reports or journalists or preachers. It comes from a retired butcher. His name is Alphonse Broussard. He's old, now lives alone in a faded shotgun house with yellowing lace curtains and a porch that sags under its own weight. But once, decades ago, he worked the cleavers and grinders at a meatpacking plant down by the river. He remembers things most people forgot. Alphonse goes to the local paper and offers a statement. Not a confession. A hypothesis. He believes the Axeman was once a butcher. Not just any butcher, a skilled one. Someone trained to disassemble carcasses quickly, efficiently, and cleanly. The way the cuts were made, the angle, the depth, the frequency of the strikes, it all points to someone who knew how to take apart flesh with precision and without emotion. You think of it now, of bone giving way, of sinew pulled taut and then sliced clean, of how that kind of work requires rhythm, requires calm, requires music. Maybe that's why the Axeman listens, to keep his hands steady. Alphonse even points out something chilling. He says many of the local butchers in 1919 used to play phonographs while they worked. Not for entertainment, but for pace, for control. to avoid overcutting or wasting meat. He says some of them preferred jazz, and now you can't stop picturing it. A man, face calm, cleaver in hand, swaying gently to a syncopated beat as he dismantles a body not for money, not for madness, but for melody. Investigators still question whether this theory holds weight. No formal connection has ever been made between the Axeman and any known slaughterhouse employees. But a quiet panic begins to bloom, because what if the killer didn't vanish? What if he just returned to work? You pass the meat counters at grocery stores differently now. You look at the men in blood-stained aprons with calloused fingers and wonder, could it be him? Could it have been passed down? A father to a son. A rhythm carried like a family secret. What's more unsettling is that no one seems eager to disprove it. Instead, something shifts. People begin treating butchers like folklore. Not feared, not hated, just watched. Like one might watch a wolf that wandered into a village and decided to stay. It's the not knowing that makes it worse. And just like that, you start hearing about other things. A man who carved elaborate initials into wooden doors of his customers, never asked, never paid. Just left his mark, as if signing a creation. A boy who mimics the Axeman's footsteps on purpose and runs through neighborhoods with a toy axe for laughs, until one day he disappears. His toy is found on the front steps of his home, clean, still warm, and then another detail comes to light. The razors. People remember that Catherine Maggio wasn't just attacked with an axe. Her throat had been slashed so deeply it almost separated her head from her body, and the razor wasn't from her home. It had been brought in. That's not improvisation, that's planning. The killer didn't need to use two weapons. He wanted to. And now, butcher becomes more than a job. It becomes a symbol, a blend of skill and savagery. A person who knows how to end life with both speed and silence. You start to wonder if the Axeman chose his name, not because of the weapon, but because of the sound it makes, wood splitting, bone cracking, the soft thunk of an axe being laid down. On a wooden counter after the job is done, you think about all the axes in your neighborhood. The ones leaned beside doorways, the ones kept in sheds, the ones forgotten behind furniture. You think about how many homes have them and never think twice. And then you realize, maybe the Axeman never needed to bring anything with him because the whole city had already armed him. That's what keeps you awake tonight. Not the music, not the murders, the truth that New Orleans itself is the accomplice. Its doors, its shadows, its tools, its people. You lie still as the record spins again. Not jazz this time, but a funeral dirge wrapped in brass. You didn't choose it. You don't remember putting it on, but it's playing now. The last note stretches longer than it should. Then silence. You hold your breath and wait for a chisel against wood. But what you hear instead is footsteps above you. You don't move. You don't even blink. Because the footsteps are real. Not imagined, not dream-born. Wood flexes under weight that isn't yours. Slow, deliberate paces across your ceiling. It's not an attic space, it's just rafters and dust. There shouldn't be room to walk, but someone is walking. You sit frozen while the last echoes of the record still hum in the needle's scratchy spin. The jazz long since bled out. Every inch of your skin tightens with the weight of memory of every survivor's story, of every chisel's sliced door and bedroom scream and blade that came not from outside, but from inside, and still you don't move. Eventually the footsteps stop. Not with a thud or creak, they just vanish. like a breath held too long and finally let go. In the silence that follows, your mind churns. Because now the question changes. What if it's not just one Axeman? What if it never was? You're not the first to wonder. Theories have long swirled like smoke through the gas lamps and gutters of New Orleans. Some say the Axeman was a singular terror man who walked among the butcher shops and record stores by day and slaughtered by night, but others whisper something older, something deeper, a group, a pact, a performance carried by more than one hand. The city's police, desperate for something solid, reviewed timelines again and again. Some of the attacks miles apart. Hours apart should have been impossible for one man to manage, unless he had a car, or a boat, or wings. But there's no evidence of that. Instead, what emerges are fingerprints that never match, shoe sizes that shift, heights described differently by terrified witnesses. It could be bad memory, or it could be something else. Investigators still question whether the Axeman was actually several men working in coordination, copying the same methods, following the same ritual, like a band that plays one song together but never shows its faces. Jazz ensemble of killers, each with their own part, each with their own rhythm. You think back on the letter, the one that promised death to those who didn't play jazz at midnight. The voice in that letter was theatrical, almost smug, but not deranged, not rambling. It was composed. What if it wasn't the work of a lone madman? What if it was a message passed between performers? Play your part, or be played. That would explain the strange irregularities, the shift in brutality, the wounds that sometimes looked surgical, other times haphazard, the sudden gap in attacks, then 2 in 1 week, like players stepping off stage, replaced by understudies. If you saw them together, would they look like anything other than ordinary men? A grocer, a butcher, a streetcar operator, a vendor at the record store. People you nod to, people who smile back. You start to picture it. The city as a stage, and behind its velvet curtain, a secret society of rhythm-obsessed monsters. Not a cult, not religious, something quieter, more careful, bound not by belief, but by tempo. You read somewhere that jazz, when it first emerged, wasn't considered music by many. It was considered dangerous, too emotional, too chaotic, too alive. Maybe that's what the Axeman loved. And maybe that's why some began to follow, not for the killing, but for the song. The city, you realize, is perfect for this kind of madness. It forgives, it forgets, it hides what it doesn't want to face. Crimes go unsolved. Murders fade into the steam rising from the streets, and the ghosts, they don't haunt, they join the party. You step outside that evening, needing air. The sky is purple with stormlight, and trumpet notes drift from a second-story window. You follow the sound like a thread at the corner. A record shop you've passed 100 times before now has a small crowd gathered inside. People are clustered near the back, heads tilted, silent. You push your way in. On the wall is a photograph, black and white, grainy, a jazz trio. One on piano, one on drums, one with a saxophone. There's no caption, no date, but every single person in that photo looks vaguely familiar. Their expressions calm, hands poised, eyes unreadable. One of them may be the saxophonist, maybe the pianist. Who could swear you've seen him delivering groceries just 2 blocks from your place. But he was older now, worn. You blink. The photo's still there, but the faces feel like they've moved. You leave, you don't sleep. Instead, you return to every theory, every possibility. You list the names of the victims and draw lines between them. You circle neighborhoods. You trace supply routes for meat, milk, flour, even sheet music. You stare at the walls and wonder who built them. You ask yourself the question no one really wants to answer. What if the Axeman wasn't a who? What if he was a what? A shared ritual, a role passed between people like a part in a play. Something that only needs a weapon, a rhythm, and a moment of silence. And what if he never stopped? You hear a knock at the door. Not your back door, this time, the front. Soft. 3 times. You stand up, heart cracking like old vinyl. You inch forward, and from the other side, you hear music, not playing, not recorded. HUMMED. A slow, breathy rendition of St. James Infirmary blues. The lights flicker, then go out. The lights stutter back to life 20 seconds later. Not all at once. One bulb flickers, then another, like the house itself is trying to decide whether it's safe to keep going. You check the front door. There's nothing there. No footprints. No note. No hum. But in the still air, you can taste something, like smoke from an old record needle. You start to wonder if the real terror isn't the Axeman himself fits the space he leaves behind, the silence he carves out of a room like a chisel through pine, the pause after the final note before the next begins. That's where he lives. That's where he waits. And now, everyone else is playing his game. Because if the Axeman is gone, or if he never was just one person, then why do the killings keep happening? Why do the headlines continue to appear, quiet and quick like ghosts, tucked between advertisements for washing powder and wartime donations? August 31st, 1919, 9th Ward. A woman named Esther Albano is found in her bed. Skull split, fingers curled like she'd been clutching at a dream when the blow landed. No signs of struggle, no valuables missing, no entry forced, and no axe. Just the wound, just the silence. This isn't copycat behavior anymore. It's evolution. There's no need for signatures now. No need for theatrics. The name Axeman hasn't appeared in a newspaper for weeks. Not because he's forgotten, but because he's become folklore, embedded. He no longer needs a chisel. The fear opens the door for him, and then the media does something strange. They try to move on. You notice it in the stories. Crime reports become vague. The police stop offering details. Articles mention domestic disturbances, robbery, gone wrong, violence under investigation. No patterns, no links. Nothing that connects the rhythm, but you're still listening. And you notice, because in almost every story, tucked in like an afterthought, is music. A neighbor who didn't hear the victim scream because the gramophone was playing, a record, left spinning when police arrived. A trumpet solo trailing out an open window into nothing. The music is still there, but it's not saving anyone anymore. You begin to realize that something's changed. The jazz is no longer armor. It's become a calling card, a siren. The one thing that tied victims together has shifted from protection to bait, and that thought doesn't leave you. You walk through the Moroni one evening, and you can feel it. The way people look over their shoulders after turning off the radio. The way a trumpet player skips certain notes like they're cursed. The way some bars, once proud of their live jazz, now close early. Silence, it seems, is safer now. You pause at one cafe and overhear a man talking to the bartender. He says, "You hear the rumor?" The bartender shakes his head. They say he's not killing randomly anymore. They say he's picking the ones who try to profit from it. From what? From him, you keep walking, because deep down you know what he meant. Jazz is becoming myth. The Axeman story is making its way into music. Musicians start writing songs, secret ones about him. One tune makes its way through the quarter called Chisel and Bone. Another, darker still, called The Man Upstairs, is only played once at a local speakeasy before the pianist refuses to ever perform it again. He claims his hands went numb halfway through. There's no sheet music for that piece. No recording, but people say they remember the melody. You don't know if that's true, but you do know what comes next. One evening, a radio station announces a special broadcast, a tribute to those lost in the silent killings, with original compositions inspired by the era of fear. They play 3 songs, each darker than the last, then static, then humming. Not the station's usual sign-off, not a glitch, just a man's voice, deep, low crooning, a melody no one recognizes, not lyrics, just breath and tone, shaped into sound. The station cuts the feed and doesn't broadcast again for a week later. When questioned, the sound technician admits he hadn't loaded any other recordings into the system. He didn't recognize the voice. It didn't come from the booth. They still can't explain it. Investigators still question whether the broadcast was hijacked or if it was simply a prank. But people remember it. And what they remember most isn't the melody. It's what the voice said at the end. Just 3 words. You stopped listening. You tell yourself it was a coincidence until your own record player turns on at 3:13 a.m. You didn't set it. You didn't touch it. It spins without a sound. No music, no static. Just the rhythmic whir of the turntable, empty of content but full of presence. You reach to turn it off, but something stops you, a breath. Behind your neck, you turn. Nothing but your living room feels occupied, not full, not haunted, just aware. And in that moment, you understand something deeper than any theory. The Axeman, whoever or whatever he was, doesn't need to kill anymore. He just needs you to listen. Because the most powerful kind of fear isn't about dying, it's about waiting to hear the sound before it happens. You start leaving the record player on, even when you're not home. Not because it helps, but because silence feels worse now. It hangs in rooms like a loaded question, and every sound that follows a creaking floorboard, a car backfiring, the wind brushing against the shutters feels like an answer you don't want. But here's the thing. It stops. Not the fear. Not the music. The Axeman. The killings stop. No more bodies. No more broken doors. No more letters. No more midnight footsteps, or flower prints, or axes gone missing. Just nothing. The city waits for the next body, the next scream, and it doesn't come. At first, the papers celebrate. They declare the nightmare over. They credit increased patrols, community awareness, the power of music. Some even say the Axeman fled back to the shadows, the river, the grave. But you know better. The absence isn't relief. It's pressure. It's a held breath. It's the drop before the beat hits. The victims are still remembered, of course. Small articles here and there, a few ceremonies. But mostly, the city does what it's always done. It moves on cafe owners. Wipe the blood off their stoops and reopen for breakfast. Bars rename cocktails after the legend. Someone starts selling carved chisels as souvenirs. A bakery downtown releases a pastry called the Jasmine's Crescent, It doesn't sell well, but it makes headlines, and for a moment, it feels like the city's reclaiming itself, until you visit the archives. It's a dusty afternoon when you walk into the old police records room, tucked beneath the courthouse like a root cellar. You're not sure what you're looking for, but something draws you there. The files on the Axeman are thinner than you'd expect. Redacted, misfiled, many marked inconclusive, or ongoing even years after the last known murder. You skim pages, photos, descriptions, scribbled, notes in faded pencil, and then you see it. A report dated August 1921, 2 years after the last official attack. It's never been published. A man named Walter Delancey, grocer, age 47, was found dead in his home. Skull fractured, axe wounds, no valuables stolen, no witnesses. Rear panel removed from the door using a flat tool. The report says the case was not believed to be connected to earlier incidents. You sit with that line for a long time, and something shifts inside you, because it means they knew. They knew it hadn't stopped. They just stopped telling people. You start digging deeper into old hospital records, obituaries, property disputes. You find more, not many, but enough. Deaths that mirror the Axeman's rhythm. Quiet, dismissed, rewritten. It's not that he stopped. It's that the city got tired of listening. You step outside into the heat and realize something else. The jazz has changed. It still plays, yes, but now it's louder, sharper, less like protection, more like defiance. Brass bands don't march for joy anymore. They march like war drums. Every note is a challenge. You wander toward the French market and pass a boy humming to himself as he walks. The tune sounds familiar, but wrong, distorted. You ask him what it is. He shrugs, supposed to keep people away. People like who? He grins, a gap in his front teeth. The man who listens. You don't sleep that night, not because of sounds, but because of their absence. The silence you used to crave has become the scariest part. You start noticing. Others feel it too. The saxophonist on the corner stops taking requests. He only plays what he calls safe songs. One woman breaks her radio with a hammer when it picks up a phantom tune between stations. Someone files a petition to ban jazz completely from one neighborhood. Not because they hate it, but because it reminds them, and then you hear about it. A letter, not published, not public, but passed between musicians. Typed again, the paper smells faintly of citrus and iron. It reads, "I have listened to your notes. I have heard your dissonance. I have felt your heartbeat falter between songs. You thought the final note had played, but music never ends. It only pauses. I will not return because I never left. No signature, no proof. But when the letter reaches your hands, it's already been folded too many times, passed from pianist to drummer to street preacher to cafe singer, like a hymn or a warning. Investigators still question whether the Axeman truly resurfaced. Some say it was all a hoax. Others believe he was captured quietly and buried in an unmarked grave to protect the public. A few insist he was never real at all, just a myth wrapped around real tragedy. But you know that's not true, because there's one more detail you haven't told anyone. Last night, as you sat by your window, the radio crackled. It wasn't playing a station, it was whispering. A man's voice humming, and beneath it, almost lost in the static, were 3 faint knocks, not on your door, from your ceiling. You spend the next day trying to explain it away. The knocks, the voice, the hum. Maybe it was a dream. Maybe a neighbor walking too heavy upstairs. Maybe a prank broadcast some rogue frequency leaking through like a ghost in the machine. Hands shake anyway. You turn every doorknob in your apartment twice. You unplug the radio. But even silence doesn't feel safe anymore. It hums too. And you realize something unavoidable. You want to know who he was. Not just what he did. Not just how, but who. Who could have carried that axe, chiseled those doors, stood above so many beds with that terrifying calm? You dig, you reach past the myths, past the smoke of jazz and fear, into court records, arrest logs, newspaper archives. Every so often, a name surfaces, but they always vanish just as quickly. Joseph Mumford. He shows up first in letters to the editor accused by rumor, not evidence. A man with a criminal past, known to associate with Italian secret societies. A face that disappeared after one of the attacks. Later, he reappears in Los Angeles, gunned down by the widow of a supposed Axeman victim. Esther Albano, they say. She shoots him point blank in broad daylight. Her testimony, that he was the one, the Axeman, the monster who ruined her life, but the evidence is thin. Investigators still question whether Mumford had any true connection to the New Orleans murders. His criminal record is real extortion, fraud, even ties to anarchist groups, but nothing links him directly to the chiseled doors, to the bodies, to the jazz. Still, the public latches on. It's easier to close the book if there's a name on the final page, but something about it doesn't sit right with you. Too neat. Too scripted. And the more you look, the more possible suspects begin to form like smoke. A disgruntled butcher, fired in 1917, vanished after the first attack. A failed musician turned drifter, known for carving musical notes into walls. A carpenter who disappeared after his tools were found at a crime scene. All plausible, all forgotten, and none ever arrested. Then there's the theory that chills you the most. That the Axeman wasn't anyone famous. That he wasn't criminal or brilliant or connected. That he was just someone ordinary, invisible. The man you pass at the market. The man who fixes your fence. The man who waves at your child from across the street. That's the most terrifying version of all, because it means he could still be here, not hiding, just living. You walk the streets of the quarter and start scanning every face. You look at their hands, are they scarred, calloused? You listen to their gait heavy, hesitant. You catch your reflection in a window and realize you've been walking like him. Slow, measured, like you belong to the rhythm now. And maybe you do. The city certainly does. Even now, over a century later, the Axeman is part of its blood. You see him in murals, in souvenir shops, in bad horror novels and late-night tours. He's become entertainment. Background music to a place already steeped in the supernatural. But when you talk to the locals, the ones who grew up with the legend, they never smile when they say his name. They never joke about the chisel. They never whistle jazz after midnight. You speak to a woman named Mel, whose great-grandfather lived during the killings. She says he used to sit by the window with a trumpet in his lap, but never played. He just held it. Like a cross dot. Another man, Marcus, tells you his grandmother refused to let music be played indoors after sunset. Said it invited his ears. And there's a boy you meet by the river, maybe 12, who swears he saw a man step out of a brick wall. Just once, in silence, he ran. never saw the man again, but he still hums that tune every time. He walks alone. You start wondering if the Axeman was even meant to be caught. Maybe that was never the point. Maybe he was born of New Orleans, itself crafted from its grief, shaped by its secrets, fed by its rhythm. The city needed something to explain its pain, and so it summoned a conductor, a figure to match the music. You return home that night and check your locks. You light a candle, not because you believe it helps, but because it's what people used to do. You pull your record player out of the closet and stare at it, the needle still dusty, unmoved, and then, on impulse, you put on a record the same. One that played the night you heard footsteps overhead. It spins, it plays, and somewhere in the middle of the song, a faint knock echoes from the back of the room, soft, deliberate. You turn, nothing there, but your heart skips. In perfect time with the beat, you realize you don't need to know who the Axeman was. You already do. He was the space between notes, the pause between breaths, the quiet before the door opens. You wake to static, not the sharp kind, like a broken speaker, but the soft hiss of an empty channelan in between space. The kind of sound that usually vanishes once you tune the dial. But this doesn't vanish. It stays, just beneath hearing, just close enough to itch. You check the radio, it's off. You check your phone, no music playing, but the sound doesn't leave. You step outside, hoping the city's noise will drown it. It doesn't. The hum follows, steady as breath, as if it's woven into the fabric of things. And maybe it is. Because when you walk through the quarter now, you feel it too, this low vibration, beneath every step, and you're not imagining it. Other people notice. A record shop you used to visit is now closed indefinitely. The owner posted a note on the door that reads, "Music is no longer safe." On Royal Street, a mural of a jazz band fades overnight. The figures are still there, but their instruments are missing, painted over, scrubbed out, or erased by something that didn't want them heard. And more strange things. Old phonographs playing without records. Street musicians refusing to perform certain songs. One club, the Silver Reed, bans all instrumental sets after midnight because of what happened. They won't say more, but you find someone who will. A girl named Cleo works at the bar. Young, but shy. She pulls you aside when she sees the way you hesitate at the threshold. "You're not from here," she says. You say nothing. She nods anyway. He listens in the notes, she tells you. But now, he's not just listening. He's echoing. You frown. She continues. People play music. He plays it back. Not at the same time. Not the same place. But later, elsewhere, slightly changed. You ever heard a song you thought you knew, but something felt off? You nod. That's him. You ask how she knows. She smiles, slow and sad. "My uncle heard a tune in his sleep. Thought it was nothing. Whistled it at breakfast that night. Our neighbor was found dead. Axe, still warm." She leaves you with that and goes back to work. And now the echo lives in you. You start listening to old songs differently. Not for the melody, but for what's underneath, the pauses, the shifts, the breaths between instruments. Because that's where he lives now. Not in blood, not in rooms. In music, in patterns repeated imperfectly. He's not just an urban legend anymore. He's a motif, and you're not the only one who feels it. You find forums, deep corners of the internet where strangers trade stories and sound clips. They post audio files, snippets of late-night radio, Jazz records with one strange note slipped in. Not wrong, just foreign. One post claims to have found a 1918 recording with a whisper, buried under the trumpet, slowed down, filtered. You can hear it, just 2 words, still listening. You play it, you regret it, because afterward, the hum in your ears grows louder. You ask yourself how many people the Axeman actually killed. The official number is fuzzy, maybe 6, maybe more, but the unofficial toll is harder to count. How many nights were stolen? How many families broken? How many songs no longer played? And then you start seeing it in other places. Cities with no history of axe murders, suddenly reporting break-ins with no motive. People waking to find their phonographs running without records. A man in Chicago disappears after uploading a jazz loop he claimed came to him in a dream. The melody, identical to one written during the 1919 terror. Not inspired, identical. Investigators still question whether any of these cases have ties to New Orleans. But those who remember the Axeman's rhythm know better. This isn't coincidence. This is migration. He's moving through the music now. He doesn't need to be here to be heard. You think about the old theory, the one you dismissed at first, that the Axeman was never a person, that he was a curse, a vibration, a dissonance. Now it doesn't seem so far-fetched, especially when the melody plays on its own. Your home, curtains drawn, candle lit, you haven't touched the record player in days, yet from the other room you hear it start. Not a full song, just a phrase, 5 notes. The same ones from the music boxes after Mardi Gras. You go to the player, the turntable is still, the needle resting, and yet you still hear the music, faint echoed, and then a second layer, breath, as if someone was standing behind you, humming. A long dot you turn, nothing but the air behind you vibrates. The candle flutters without wind, and a whisper follows not from your ears, from your bones. He never left. You finally understand what people meant when they said the music changed, because now it's not a shield, it's an invitation. You stop listening to music, not completely, just when you're alone. Just when the hour grows long and the wind slips in sideways and the shadows stretch in ways they didn't used to. That's when you turn the knob all the way down until the static vanishes and the world returns to its quiet, anxious pulse. But quiet doesn't feel safe anymore. It feels like waiting. You walk differently now. You move through the city not as a local or a visitor, but as something in between, like a ghost that remembers too much. You no longer linger near jazz clubs. You cross the street when you hear brass in the air. Not because you don't love it, but because you do. And the Axeman knows that. The final attacks, if you can even call them that, stop without ceremony. No announcement, no headlines, just silence. A city holding its breath for so long, it forgets how to exhale. And when the fear lifts, it's not relief that follows, it's loss, because something's missing now. The jazz still plays, yes, but it feels thinner, like the soul was scraped out. The rhythm remains, but the pulse is hollow, as if every musician can feel that they're not the one in control of the tempo anymore. You begin hearing about towns far from New Orleans, little places, unremarkable, but suddenly gripped by whispers. A child's drawing of an axeman on the wall. A dog that won't stop barking at the gramophone. A window found open, even though it was nailed shut the day before. Always, there's a song in the background. Sometimes it's a jazz riff. Sometimes just 5 notes, repeated again and again, and always, the silence that follows feels too long. You find an old musicologist who's been studying the Axeman's melodic legacy, as he calls it. He's made graphs, charts, spectral analyzers of century-old recordings. He says one thing that sticks in your brain like a sliver of glass. Even the silence has a pattern, he says. And you know what he means, because it's there, a kind of invisible fingerprint left behind, not in the violence, but in the pauses, in the decision of when not to strike. He chose silence like a weapon. He composed fear like a song. And now, decades later, people hum his melody without even knowing why. He's in pop samples, in background scores, in the echo between notes, in experimental jazz tracks recorded by musicians who swear they were just improvising. One even says, off the record, that when he played the tune late at night, the lights in his studio went out, all at once. And when they came back on, the reel had recorded something extra, a breath and a whisper, too late. You stand at the edge of a street now, hearing the faint sound of a saxophone drifting through a cracked window. It's a song, you know, but one note sounds off too flat, too slow, or maybe just too aware, and suddenly, you realize you're holding your breath again. Still, after all this time, the Axeman never came for you, but you still feel like a survivor, because he didn't need to come back. He became something bigger, something deeper, something that lives in the muscle memory of fear. He's no longer behind the door. He is the door. A ritual passed down in rhythm, a warning etched in wood, an echo carried on vinyl and tape and memory. And now you understand the truth. The real terror wasn't that he killed. It's that we gave him the stage. We listened, and we still do. So now you sit quietly. Let the music fade. Let the silence come, slow and steady like a tide slipping over a stage long since abandoned. The story's been told, the doors are shut, the records have stopped spinning, but that hush, the one wrapping itself gently around your shoulders, that's not an ending, that's a rest. A pause in the melody. The Axeman may have vanished, but the rhythm he left behind plays on. You feel it in empty hallways, in quiet rooms, in the stillness that follows a broken chord. And maybe you'll forget. Maybe you'll let your guard down. Maybe someday you'll hum a tune without thinking, a song you don't remember learning, one that plays itself when the lights go out. And when you do, just listen, not for the notes, for what comes between them. Because sometimes it's not the music that keeps us awake, it's the silence after. So take a breath, let your shoulders relax, let the sounds around you return to what they were. A fan humming, a clock ticking, your own heartbeat finding its way back to calm. You made it to the end. This story doesn't ask you to remember it. It asks you to feel it, to carry it like a quiet note between ribs. And maybe, just maybe, you'll never hear jazz quite the same way again. Sweet dreams.